Welcome to episode number 19 on the My Story podcast. The My Story podcast features interviews with leaders, influencers, and entrepreneurs who tell us their story and the life lessons they've learned along the way. Hi, my name's Conrad Weaver, and I'm the host for the show. I'm a filmmaker, entrepreneur, storyteller, and today I'm so happy that you've stopped by to listen to the show. Whether this is your first time at the My Story podcast or you're a regular listener, thank you for stopping by and listening to the show. There are millions of podcasts out there, and I'm honored that you'd listen to this one. On the show today is my interview with Jen Preisendanz.
I hated myself. I would lay in bed at night and just squeeze my skin as hard as I could in hopes that I would magically turn into somebody else.
Jen is a recovery advocate, an author, and speaker. Her story is a compelling journey that involves sexual abuse as a child, which eventually led to a heroin addiction and finally to a life of recovery. Jen will tell you that recovery is possible, and her story is a great example of this. So without any further ado, here's my interview with Jen Preisendanz. So Jen, welcome to the My Story podcast.
Hello.
It's good to have you on here. We connected a while back on Instagram, and so it's great to have you on the program and to hear a little bit more about your story.
It's awesome to be here.
So
it's nice
tell
to
me,
hear your voice.
Well, yeah, it is good to hear your voice too. Tell me a little bit about you, where you live, and your family, and all that.
Okay, so my name is Jen, and I live in Southern California. And I have two children, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. So I am super busy mama.
Going through the terrible twos?
Oh, we're going through the terrible everythings. Yeah, she's a handful, but she's amazing. My kids are, I really did not ever expect to be a mother at all. So it's been just a journey, an amazing one. So yeah, I'm just, I'm doing my thing, and I'm an author, and I'm writing 2 more books at the moment.
Wow.
Don't suggest writing 2 at the same time, but they're all
I was going to say, how do you do that?
You shouldn't. You absolutely should not. But I started one, which my second book, my first book is just a general overview of I want to say a memoir, but it's actually going to be a series of 5 books that will collect together to be my memoir. Short
cool.
reads. Yeah. It's just an overview of basically my story. And then my next book was going to be strictly my addiction and recovery story.
Okay.
I view my addiction as an abduction in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it abducts everything that we are when we fall into addiction. And so it is going to be written in that perspective. Mm-hmm. And then my following book was going to be, is going to be, letters to my inner child about healing from childhood sexual abuse. However, all of it's coming to me together. So I'm trying to write them both at the same time. We'll see it's
which
a lot.
One comes out first, right?
whatever finishes first. Yeah. It's a process publishing a book. My goodness.
Yeah. So did you start out wanting to write?
I've always been a writer. I mean, I shouldn't say been a writer, but I've always loved writing. I've always journaled. Journaling has saved me so much throughout my life from a lot of stuff. So I've always loved writing. I did not, the book idea, just, I have kind of a wow story. And I know it's kind of out there, and a lot of people always say, my gosh, you should write a book. And so after a while, I'm like, well, maybe I should, maybe I should write a book. Yeah. And I just, I had a lot of journaling that I had saved and stuff. And so I just started kind of putting it together, and I'm like, holy crap, I kind of have like a book here.
Be a thing, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been great. It's been, it's a very vulnerable feeling, putting your story out there.
Sure.
It's
kind of like sitting someone down in front of a camera, like what I do, and
right.
producing heroin script. And I'm just amazed at the people that I work with that were willing to just kind of bare their soul and tell their
Yeah.
story. And it's really humbling on my end.
It is. I am humbled daily by, by the people that I interact with and the communities I'm involved with. It's just, the people in recovery are like the salt of the earth, if you
Yeah,
know what I'm saying. I
absolutely.
mean, it's just like when you've been to hell and back,
Hmm.
it just gives you some sort of, you just have this compassion and willingness to just do whatever. You just want to help people in some
Mhm.
way.
Hmm. For the past 3 years, I worked on, my documentary Heroin's Grip, and I like to say in the talks that I give that, I got to spend 2 years of my life hanging out with people I never thought I'd hang out with,
Yeah.
and it totally changed me,
Yeah.
and it changed my perspective, and it gave me such a respect for people like you who have been through hell, like you said,
Yeah.
and have come through the other side and are still fighting.
Yeah.
Because it's a daily fight, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's, I have over 8 years in recovery.
Good for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Miracles, lots of miracles put together, but it does get better. I'm a firm believer in, like, my addiction, for me at least, and for a lot of people, is just a manifestation of a lot of unresolved trauma and issues.
Mhm.
So my fight to not use drugs today is very minimal. I don't
Mhm.
wake up in the morning anymore wanting to use. However,
Right.
my journey from healing from all the things that I was willing to die to avoid, that is a journey that I'll be on for my life,
Mm.
and
Mm.
that's the important stuff. If we just treat the addiction, it's like
Mhm.
cutting the weed off at the top, but the root's still there. We got to get
Right.
down to the
Sure.
root and find out why the pain, how did this happen, and how can we heal our lives? Everyone's
Mhm.
capable of healing their life. That's
So, without getting into all the details, because we want
yeah,
people to go out and buy your book, tell
right.
me just kind of the cliff notes of your story. Where did you grow up, and what journey did you take to get to where you are today?
Yeah, how did I get here? Well, I many people ask me, when did your addiction start? And I believe my addictions, like I said, are manifestations from a lot of things that I went through as a child, and it comes out in my behaviors and my thinking and my feelings. And so, I've been, I had been working on and perfecting the art of escaping pain since
Mm.
my very first memories as a little
Wow.
girl. I grew up in a home full of addiction
Mm.
and untreated
So, were your
mental illness.
parents?
Yeah,
Did your parents
my
drink
mom,
and drug?
my dad now, and my brother now, but my mom then.
Mm.
Untreated mental illnesses. My mom is, just debilitated with mental illnesses.
Mm.
And so I grew up with a lot of chaos and a lot of confusion. And, I just wanted her to love me. And I was willing to do anything and be anything that she wanted. And it was just never enough. And so I felt very unloved and unseen. And when I was about 3, my parents decided to join a religious cult.
Mm. Wow.
So, yeah, I laugh because this is my life. I mean, we're like talking about grocery shopping for me. I talk about this all the time, but yeah, it was not funny. um, I was born in Santa Barbara, California.
Mhm.
But when we joined that cult, they moved all of us to Mobile, Alabama, which is where I lived
Oh,
till I was
wow.
9. Yeah.
That's a big change.
Huge change. And as things like that go, over time, things began to become very controlling. There was a lot of financial abuse, spiritual abuse, and for me, sexual abuse. The
Mm.
elder of the church called me into his office and played with my hair and gave me all the attention that I never received at home. I
Mm.
was starving for love.
Mhm. Sure.
I was a perfect target for a predator because, he knew everything about my family. So he knew how broken my mom was and
Mm.
how everybody was so distraught. And, I was a perfect target. So
And he took advantage of that, right?
very much so. And, I learned to escape my situation in my mind. I would leave my body to him, and I would drift off in my imagination, and I never told anybody anything.
Wow.
And, he molested me until I was almost 10 when my dad finally fled that situation, and we moved back to California. But all those secrets, and all that, it grew into a beast of shame inside of me that, I literally, between all the stuff at the church or the cult, and then my situation at home with my mom, and just, I hated myself to a degree that I can't even come up with in words. I would lay in bed at night and just squeeze my skin as hard as I could in hopes that I would magically turn into somebody else. I mean, I just was tortured and, developed eating disorders at like 7, so many things. I just, my son is 6 and I can't even fathom him even comprehending the stuff that I was put into, the situations. But, when I was 12, I found a bottle of vodka. And I'm telling you, and I say this a lot, that I believe I was an alcoholic from that first drink, because it was the first peace I had ever known. And the beast of shame inside of me was quieted for the first time ever, and I before that little drink was even halfway finished, I was already scheming in my mind of how I was going to get more and drink the rest of my life. I was always trying to escape myself somehow. And I did that. I drank as often as a 12-year-old can find alcohol, I was obsessed constantly with trying to find it. But as my drinking and my alcoholism grew and grew, and I wasn't facing anything of my past. I was keeping so many secrets that were the stuff that was going on at home with my mom, and hallucinations she was having, and suicide attempts, and just horrible stuff. And all the secrets from, my childhood sexual abuse. And that pain just kept growing. And that's what happens when we don't face that stuff. It does not go away. It actually grows right behind us. And so alcohol, stopped working.
Sure.
And in a weird, I don't know if it was just what you want to call it, a stroke of bad luck, twist of fate, I had to have a wisdom tooth pulled, and I was prescribed Vicodin. And that is and I'm sure, being in what you've done with your film, it is a very common way that people slip into an opioid and heroin addiction is through a prescription from a dentist or somebody.
Statistics say that about 85% of people who use IV heroin started with some kind of prescription.
Absolutely. And again, from that, I mean, I can remember 2 pills in, I was obsessed. And
just like you were when you
just
took that
like
vodka.
the alcohol, it's like I was just obsessed. It quieted the beast again, because like I said, the alcohol wasn't working anymore alone, and so, I became an absolute, I had many procedures I didn't need done. I doctor shopped and ER hopped.
How old were you at this time?
I think I was in like maybe 20.
Okay.
And I became, I found somebody that sold stuff on the streets. I started OxyContin. I ended up losing every friend I had. I became homeless. A lot of people assume I became homeless as a heroin addict. And no, I did not. I became homeless as a prescription pill addict. That can happen, just because it comes from a doctor does not make it any less, destroying. It destroyed my entire life. And I ended up homeless and, living that life. And one day I was on this couch of some guy I was staying with, and I was in with horrible withdrawals. And there's really no way to describe opiate withdrawal unless you've been there. It's all consuming. And he said he had a guy coming over. I assumed the guy had pills, so I was like stoked. And when he got there, it had heroin and a needle.
Wow.
And, at that point, I did not have any self-worth whatsoever. I thought I was worthless, and I didn't care about myself. And two, I was absolutely desperate. And so I just put my arm out, please help me.
Wow.
And from that moment on, I was a heroine, and I added meth to the spoon, and for about 13 years. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Homeless, hopeless, eating from garbage cans. There were times when I would walk the streets and talk to myself in psychosis. I could tell you, go on and on and on, but
So what was the catalyst to you getting sober?
Well, I was in and out of jail. More times than I could count. And I was finally sentenced to prison. I was sentenced to 4 years in prison, state prison. And, when I got to prison, I still behaved like I did on the streets. I was holding in so much pain. I acted so tough, and I started smuggling tobacco. And just, the thing that helped me in prison is that my access to drugs, although there are drugs in prison, it is not as plentiful. So I didn't get strung out in there.
Yeah.
And it gave me time. I think I needed that time to kind of, I was so fogged over that the last time I was arrested, I had lost the ability to read. I literally could not put, letters together to make a word or words to make a sentence. I was gone. And so it about halfway through my sentence, I had just a moment that just, a sensation came over me, and I just looked around at my surroundings, and it finally hit me. I was 34 years old, and I had absolutely nothing to show for my feet being on that earth all those years. Nothing. I had track marks on my neck and a horrible felony record, and nobody. And it just finally hit me that I need to do something to change my life, before my addiction took my life from me. And, there's a teeny tiny spark. It was really small, but a small spark that finally ignited in my heart that I just didn't want to die that way. Like, I just didn't want to die on some filthy McDonald's bathroom floor. I didn't want to overdose in some riverbed as a transient with her identification pending. And that is the absolute reality of where my addiction goes. That is not at all far-fetched for that to have happened to me.
What do you think was that spark that gave you that thought?
I call it a divine intervention. I don't know. I don't know, whether you believe in a God or the universe, or or it could have been my intuition. I'm finally hearing after all those years of being so loaded, I don't know. For me, I feel like it was something bigger than me. Just, I feel like there's a lot of miracles, left to my own devices, I should be dead. So something clicked in me, and I just held on.
There was still a purpose and a reason for you to be here.
There was, absolutely, and I, even when I didn't see it, there was. And so that's why I say, there's a lot of miracles that I can't quite explain. I do not know how I survived all those years. And I do not know how I managed to stay. The first 4 years of my recovery were horrible because I still hadn't faced so much pain. And so I was just not using.
So you hadn't dealt with what you had experienced in the past.
No, I had not. I was just trying, I couldn't even understand how people brush their teeth without using. My whole entire life was saturated in addiction and addiction behavior. So my first couple years were just, learning how to exist in regular life. I did not know how. I was, I lived my life like an animal, really.
In the interviews I did for my film, one of the families I interviewed, they were talking about their son and people in addiction. They said people that are caught in addiction get behind in life.
Oh, yeah.
And
totally. Yeah, you're completely stunted. For sure. So I was 34, but on the outside, but the inside was just, I was a wounded little girl on the inside. I hadn't faced anything. I was just so raw. And so, the first several years, I just held on to the fact I didn't want to go back to prison sometimes. I had no hope for happiness. I did not think that there was any life possible for someone like me. I just sometimes didn't want to go back to prison. Or I think about how horrible, I didn't want to be living under a bridge anymore, And I always tell people, hold on to what you got to hold on to. It doesn't matter. Hold on to it. I don't care what it is. I don't care if someone tells you that's not the right reason to get into recovery. Don't listen to anybody else. Hang on, because it does get better, and then it gets good, and then it feels like freedom. But it does not happen overnight, and everybody's timeline is different, and my timeline, it took me a long, long time. And then as time went on, I started really feeling like, okay, all these memories are coming up, and I just knew in my heart that it's time for me to face my childhood. It's time.
And what did you, and how did that happen? How did you go through that?
Well, I just kind of I started backtracking from the day I was back. And I had to work through a lot of stuff with my mom. I basically grew up without a mom. And I had to work through a lot of resentment and a lot of confusion and a lot of, I blame myself, for not, and I thought I was not worth enough. My mom didn't want to live for me. So who would, I'm just not worth anything and all this stuff. And it just all lies. I've believed so many lies in my life. It's ridiculous. And I backtracked through just a forest of wreckage and ended up, back at that little girl who was shaken and quiet in the corner and waiting for him to come in the room. And, I've had to do I did a lot of therapy, and I did a lot of writing, and I still do a lot of inner child work where I actually, I meditate on a picture of myself, not meditate on her, but I hold a picture of myself at that age, and I envision, and I pick her up and hold her and tell her that none of that was her fault. And she is sunlight and perfect, and that she doesn't have to be afraid anymore. And all these things I do, it all connects to my addiction recovery.
Right.
Because I have to heal inside, or I'm going to want to use again because the pain will be too great.
Right. So at what point then did you say, hey, I've got to put this into a book form?
Well, my life started coming together, and, I got this, I had my son. Becoming a mother was huge for me, and for lots of reasons, which you can read my book if you want to hear about all that. Lots of reasons why being a mother affected me in a lot of ways. But then I just, I started I remember, I started going on social media a little bit, and I'd always been outspoken, not always, but when I started my recovery journey, I felt that passion that I'm sure you saw in so many people you interviewed to share the real raw truth of my life, because I wanted to help. I want people to know they're not alone. There is a huge power in that me too, and hearing that, you're not wrong. You're not too damaged. Like, there's so many of us out there, and, you're not alone. And that's such a big, amazing feeling for somebody that's, addiction is a very isolating problem. It's just, it's an isolation is horrible, and, so I started, I've always shared in my local, meetings or, whatever. And then I just I got into social media a little bit, and I remember my first share where I really shared about my mom, my mother wound, not having a mom and being a daughter.
Was that scary?
It was terrifying. Yeah, because I was afraid people were going to be, give me a lot of grief about, having to set boundaries with the mom, but that's your mother, that's your family, and I did get some of that. But what I mainly got was messages from women just flooding my DMs telling me, thank you for telling you just basically told my story, or thank you for having the courage, because I thought that there was something wrong with me. And I thought maybe I'm onto something. And from that day on, I've just been, I share it all. I share about my addiction. I share about, the sexual abuse, and I share about my mother wound, and I just share it all. And, it's like every day I'm blown away by the responses from people. Mm-hmm. It's so moving. I am moved to tears every day by somebody. The courage that people show and their willingness to heal and face just horrendous stuff. It's just, I believe in this life so much. Mm-hmm. I just...
How did writing your book play a role in your recovery process?
Oh, it was so good for me, first of all, I think writing is super therapeutic. I highly recommend people do it. I also recommend using a pen and paper. I think there's something healing with a pen and paper. I actually write my books in a pen and paper, which everyone thinks I'm so strange, but there's something really amazing that happens when you write with a pen and paper versus, on your laptop or whatever. So that part was therapeutic. It was really good for me to find that last little bit of courage to send out my story for the world, for anybody to see, and be like, what, this is my truth. And it may not be a story for everybody. It may not be a story that's going to resonate with everybody, but it is a story for someone. And the fact that I'm alive today, and not just alive, but I'm actually living and thriving in life.
There is a difference, right?
Oh, huge difference. Yeah. Survival mode sucks. I've been a survivor my whole life, and that shit that's not living.
Yeah. There are some people whose hearts are beating, but they're not living.
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah. Survival mode is, I don't recommend it. And, I've been in survival mode since day one of my life, really. So it's such a blessing to be I don't wake up treading water anymore. I actually wake up and have the feelings in my heart to do something better. I always say, I don't even want to be the woman I am right now next year. I just want to keep, everything's in motion. I just want to keep in motion. This world has so much to offer. And the fact that I actually believe today that I'm worthy of whatever it is just huge. And I just cannot keep that to myself. I have to spread that.
So who did you write the book for? When you were writing the book, who did you think was going to read this?
It is kind of directed towards women. I have had a lot of men really find a lot out of it, but I wanted to write a book. I wanted to target my audience to women who are trying to heal from their childhoods. It is obviously my addiction stories in there, and like I said, that's kind of why I'm writing little short books that come together, because they're all kind of specifically targeted to certain things, so that people can find something that maybe they feel more drawn to. But most people that have unresolved trauma are also in addictions or are in recovery from addictions. I mean, that is
right.
The connection is as strong as diabetes and obesity or something. I mean, it's huge.
Right.
And it's something that needs to be talked about. It's something that needs to be looked at. And, it is something I hear daily, constantly from other people in recovery and people in their addictions. I wanted to write it to people who felt like they weren't worth anything. Those are my people.
Wow.
Those are my people, the people that are just, even right now on the streets right now, allowing their bodies to be ravaged for a 5 bag of heroin because they're sick. Those are my people, because those people are worth something, and they're worth just as much as anybody else. And they need to be told that they're loved and that healing is possible, and not just told, but shown. what healing looks like. I can't heal anybody else, but I can show what I've done to heal my life, and that it is possible, and that I was just like them.
What should people, and so when I'm showing my film, I often tell people that, I'm not someone in recovery. I've never went down the addiction path.
Hmm.
Thank God.
Yeah.
So for many years, I had the attitude of, it's not my problem.
Right.
Why should I do anything about this? What can people, like I said, like me, what should we do? What can we do to help people like who you were?
Yeah. That's a very tricky question, because, like I said, addiction is like an abduction. You are not speaking to that person anymore. You're speaking to their addiction. And so it is very tricky to get someone back. It's like Stockholm syndrome. It's where you are absolutely in hell, but you are so screwed up and manipulated that you actually protect that abuse. That is exactly what addiction is. And so it is very difficult. The thing I would say the most is that everybody deserves kindness.
Right.
And everybody deserves to be treated as a human being. And addiction is not the easy way out. And that is a very ignorant belief, that addiction is like choosing the easy way out. To live in a life of addiction is hell. It is horrible. And so I think, instead of seeing people as lazy or trying to get the easy way out or whatever, see them as suffering. And, addiction affects anybody, and any economical or social, it can happen to your child.
Yeah.
And so, instead of separating yourself like, oh, that's just not my problem, well, it could very well be your problem. And guess what?
Right.
That person that's on the street that you're looking down on may recover and be the person that saves your kid.
Wow, that's some of the exact things that I've been hearing for the past couple of years from people that I've worked with and interviewed. And the message that I'm trying to bring when I go out to speak to people is that people caught up in addiction need love. They need acceptance. They need you to put your arm around them and say, you know what, I'll walk with you through this journey, as difficult as it may get. And that's a very, very hard thing to do.
Yeah, it is very hard. And it's very hard. There's a lot of behaviors that suck when you're an addict. I mean, when you're in an addiction, I was, behaving in a way that did not match who I was in my heart. And that's pretty much what everybody in addiction is doing. That's not who they are.
So who are some of the people who have influenced you in your recovery?
Oh goodness, there's so many. I mean, and as I change, things change. So now I'm really getting into EMDR therapy and stuff. I mean, there's so many, like Gabor Mate and Johan Hari. There's Brene Brown. There's so many writers and speakers and people that really, they are also in recovery and just really speak to the like having compassion. And that's the thing for me. I don't really play too much with the whole dealing with like whether Matt is good or not, or the logistics and the chemicals and all that stuff, because I feel like that's all important, but I'm here to get to the bottom. I'm here to dive with you.
The underlying root.
I'm here to dive with you into everything that lives just below that surface of sobriety, and I don't actually use the word sobriety hardly ever, because sobriety to me is the absence of substances, and recovery is healing the parts of me that once needed those substances to survive.
So how do you stay active in your community, in the recovery community?
Yeah, I mean, I'm active. My life is recovery. I mean,
sure.
So I'm constantly, obviously, I mean, social media, DMs, podcasts constantly. And I have, I go to NA and AA when I can out here. And I mean, everything is recovery my whole entire life,
Hmm.
I think it has to be that way. And it doesn't even have to be. I should not even say that. I like it that way. I love it that way.
Does that keep you kind of on the straight and narrow, so to speak?
It keeps me alive, like enthusiastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it keeps me just feeling so. I wake up in the morning and I just feel so on fire for life and for the possibilities. And I see a lot of stuff. There's people dying all the time. People that I couldn't reach, and that nobody could reach, and they're just dropping like flies. The drugs are changing, and the people that years ago may have survived their addiction to find recovery and become another person like me who's sharing their story are now dying because the drugs are changing and people are overdosing everywhere.
Right. What
And
do
it
you
makes
do?
it even scarier.
I have some friends, I have a lot of friends here locally who are really big involved in the local recovery community, and their phone's always on, their phone's always going off, text
Mm.
messages from one person or another. My one friend has said, if I turn my phone off, I'm afraid that that one call may be the call that's going to save someone's life.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Compassion fatigue, I think that is what they call that.
Mm, right.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's very common. And I have definitely been through that. And I think it is so important to take care of yourself.
Sure.
Because if you empty yourself out, and there's a lot of people that are not going to find recovery. And that is the unfortunate truth of it.
Right. Right.
But that doesn't mean we don't keep fighting. So it is hard. It is hard and heartbreaking to watch someone drowning, like that quote, it's to watch someone drown when all they have to do is stand up and they're just drowning. For me, it's like anything. It's even like motherhood, self-care is so important. I cannot be a vibrant mother if I'm absolutely worn to the bone.
Sure.
So I definitely make my own care important. I wake up in the morning and I do, about an hour of my own time. I wake up before my children, and that's my time to meditate and pray and write, and I drink my coffee, and I have my time to myself and get my heart right and my spirit fed, and then I'm ready for the day, and there are times when I have to. Boundaries are so important, and boundaries are super important when you're dealing with addiction and people in addiction as well.
Right. Sure.
It is very difficult to set boundaries with somebody, but you have to, because I matter too,
Right. Exactly. And
and
if you don't
so
take care of yourself and you're in an unhealthy place, then
then I'm no
the
good to anybody.
vulnerability. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So I
Mm,
definitely, I have time set every morning to myself before I start, answering my DMs or anything like that, and I just, I walk in nature, and I'm with my kids, and I just, I try to have balance. And, there are times when there's a lot going on, as far as maybe with somebody that's trying to get help, or
mhm,
a lot going on, maybe, with my book or whatever. And yeah, sometimes I get off balance, I'm human.
mhm.
But I try to be really self-aware and catch it now, and really reel myself back in, because I don't want to be caught up in any one thing too much. I just want to like enjoy all that life has to offer.
Right. Right. So let me ask you this, and if you don't want to answer this, that's fine. So how does, or if it does faith in a higher power or God,
Hmm.
does that play a role in your life?
Oh, it's huge for me.
Mm,
I grew up, like I said, in the cult, and so I was abused in the name of God, and so it was difficult. You know, it can be still difficult for me in organized religion.
mhm.
And so, but I've always known that that was not of God. And
Sure.
so
Sure.
that was something completely wrong, and twisted and manipulated by
Right.
man, human beings. And so, I am extremely spiritual, and everyone will tell you that knows me, like, if you have if you're, having a hard time with spirituality, come to my house, because I will shove it in every orifice I can find. And I'm not religious, and I don't have to, you don't have to believe in my God or anything, but spirituality is so huge, and for some people, spirituality is energy. They get energy and feeling, but for me, yeah, I definitely believe that there's a God in my life, that, someone that's been looking out for me, and just has always known I was worth something, even when I believed I wasn't. And, I think it's huge. I think it's important for people to
I
find
think that
something.
there's a verse I think it's in Proverbs, that talks about how the Creator knew you before.
Yeah, knew every hair on your head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
before you were even conceived.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, addiction, living a life in addiction, that is, there is no sight of spirituality in addiction. I mean, addiction cuts you off from the spirit or energies instantly. So it's very difficult for people to come out of that existence and latch on to spirituality right away. So I try to be very understanding about that. And I lived it. I was the same way, it just takes time, and everybody has to find their own groove. And that's the thing, like, I really feel like, recovery there's no perfect narrative for recovery. Everybody has a personal journey, and we all need to support our own everybody's journey. People get very Bible beaterish about, which route they went. And so everybody better go that way, or you're doomed to relapse, or you're doomed to be, just a miserable, sober person. Well, I used to feel that way too, because I, went to NA and AA. The 12 steps saved me big time. And so in the beginning, I was very fearful if anybody went another direction, because I found what worked for me.
Right.
So I was just like, oh my God, you can't do that, because you're going to relapse. You can't leave NA or AA, or you can't go. And so as my recovery has expanded, I have expanded so far around the 12 steps that I have so many other tools. I love refuge recovery, celebrate recovery, all the recoveries, there's so many ways that people can find what fits them. Everybody's different.
I've been told that there are many paths that lead into addiction.
Yeah.
And so there's also many paths that lead out.
Exactly. The journey to addiction is very personal, and the same with the journey through recovery, And so I'm just like, whatever works. And that's why I say, just hold on to it. Don't listen to what anybody, all the peanut gallery, because they're always talking.
Tell me a little bit about where we can get your book, where it's available, and what people can expect when they pick it up.
So it is, Shape of a Woman, and it is on Amazon. And that's the only place I have it right now. That's like the central for books.
Yeah, sure.
And, it is a short read, so you don't have to worry about a super long book. And it's just an overview of my life, and about healing, and about that I'm not bound to the way I have been shaped, and that nobody is. And we are all capable of healing our lives and taking our lives back from whatever held us hostage. And, my next books will be coming out soon. And, who knows? I don't know. I'm open for whatever. And that's the miracle of recovery. That's the blessing. That's the gift, is that I don't have to just wake up and, figure out how I'm going to get through the day. It's like I actually have a future that is open wide, and I'm ready for it. I'm here for it all. And anybody can have that. Anybody.
That is so true. So are you available to speak, or you have this kind of
I speak. I've been speaking, and what's weird is I'm such a writer that speaking is oh my gosh, I always sign myself up to speak, and then I'm kicking myself. Why did I say I was going to speak? I'm so nervous,
You have to write your speech, and then
I know. I'm like, oh my God, if I could sit there and read it, it'd be great, but I can't. So I'm like, But I speak at events, and I just spoke at one recently that we had just had our first National Sober Day on the actual calendar. So I spoke at that, and it's great. I just love people so much, and I love connecting. And there's just, if anybody wants to, find me on social media, it's resurrection with a K _of_me. That's Instagram, that's Facebook, that's Twitter.
And I'll put all those links in the show notes below.
Okay,
so
yeah. I mean, I answer all my DMs. I have,
and she does.
I really do, yeah. And I have just an amazing amount of different communities that I'm involved in. And so even if maybe I'm not the one that you feel personally hooked with, or maybe you're looking for something completely different, I know so many amazing communities. And that's what I do a lot is, people come to me with different issues, and, I am not a therapist, but I know lots of therapists, and I just, man, you never have to feel alone. I mean, there are just communities of people healing and talking and speaking and loving each other through so many things that, for someone to feel alone today just breaks my heart. It's just so unnecessary.
Absolutely. And there's even people like me who are not in recovery, I care about people, and I love talking to people and hearing their stories. And I wish more people would be willing to spend time with people in recovery, because I've met some of the most amazing people on my journey.
It's it's amazing. It just, there's all the people that have been through stuff, and we all are. I love people in general. You don't have to be in recovery,
Right.
but
Yep.
people that are willing to open up about their feelings and about their passions, and those people I love it. Artists, and I don't know. I just think that people are just so, unfortunately, there are people that are just, like you said, just their hearts are beating, but they're just not living. And that's just, it's just, I just think life is so beautiful, and it is painful, but in the pain is the power to change your life. There's my sentence.
I was just going to say that. That's
Boom,
your log
it
line.
came to me.
So I'm going to ask you the question.
Okay.
In the movie about your life is made, what will the log line be?
The power to change your life is held in the pain that you're so desperate to avoid.
That's perfect.
That's it. That is the absolute nutshell of my life. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Hey, it came. Woo!
Yay. So what is the next big thing for you? A book?
Yeah, the next big thing will probably be my next book. I think so. Yeah. Who knows?
So,
I don't know. Depending on if there's...
So when can we expect that?
Oh, now. Let's see. I would say, 6 months maybe. I mean, it has to go through editing process and publishing and all that stuff. But yeah.
Yep.
I don't self-publish, so I'm going to actually go through a different publisher this time, I think. So I have to go through all that, process of them either wanting to publish my book or not. But that's probably the next thing. I really need to actually, I have so much going on between, I do tons of podcasts, tons and tons, like literally.
Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on the program today. It's
I love it. I'm so stoked you asked me.
A little bit different from the rest of the shows that I've done in the past, but I love talking to you and hearing your story. And thank you for your time, and congratulations on just all the things you've accomplished and where you're going. And looking forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for telling your story. And if you know anyone who would be encouraged by Jen's recovery story, please send them the link to this episode. Thanks so much for listening. And if you like what you're hearing on this show, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and please share it with your friends and family. I'm always eager to hear your feedback, what you like, what you don't like. So if you could leave a review, I'd really appreciate it. Next week on the My Story podcast, we're going to hear from David Weigelt. David is the president of the Central Maryland C12 Group. He's an entrepreneur and a business leader here in Maryland. I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy our conversation, so tune in next week for my interview with David Weigelt. Hey, if you like the music on today's show, it's from my friend Drew Davidson. You can get his latest album, hear all his music on iTunes, on Spotify, or at drewdavidson.com. Last, if you have an idea for an interview you'd like to hear, send me a message and I'll see what I can do. Thanks so much for listening. I'll talk to you again next week on the My Story Podcast.